All right. Hello and welcome to Thank You 5. This is a weekly show hosted by Strawdog Theater Company, where we bring theater artists from around the globe, in this case, the Midwest part of the globe, into a conversation about live theater in a digital world with a spirit of gratitude and innovation. My name is Hank Boland, and I'm an ensemble member here at Strawdog Theater Company, have been for about 15 years. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can actually head over to the Strawdog website, strawdog.org slash thank you 5. There's dashes in between there, I believe, to join the chat if you want to ask questions of our guests or vote on questions so that we know what people want to hear answered. We can do that, and those questions will go to our panelists. And speaking of panelists, let's meet tonight's guests. Ashley, could you start with an introduction?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Ashley Bellet, and I am a costume designer and costume crafts artisan and a writer. I teach at Purdue University, and I am working on a few writing projects as well. So that's me.
Melanie.
Melanie.
I am Melanie Keller, she, her. I am a Chicago native. I'm an actor and a director based here in Chicago, but been working regionally. Yeah, that's a real short version of who I am. Why am I?
Carrie, why don't you hit us up with who you
Sure.
are?
Carrie Reed, pronouns she, her. I am the theater and dance editor for the Chicago Reader, which is the oldest weekly paper in the city and possibly in the country. I'm not really sure on that one. Been at that job for about 4 years, but been freelancing and doing various kinds of arts journalism and criticism, mostly in Chicago for the last 30 years. I did have a little bit of a sojourn in the Bay Area in the 90s. So that's who I am.
All right. And Jim.
Hi, I'm James Sherman. Jim is fine. Pronouns are he, him. I am a Chicago native. I am a playwright and a recovering actor. I was a member of the Victory Gardens Playwrights Ensemble, and I've written a bunch of plays. These are some of them. And I also teach at Columbia College, Chicago, and DePaul University.
Fantastic. Welcome, everyone. Thank you all for being here tonight. I am looking forward to listening to all of your brilliance and all of your great responses and conversation, as I'm sure everybody else is. And we're going to start like we always do. What is theater? Or what is theater to you? And what is theater, particularly maybe in the digital age that we're living in? Ashley, what do you got?
Oh, goodness. So I'm actually in the middle of teaching an intro to theater class right now. So we have been talking about this, and I could boil it down to 3 elements. But when I think about what's in my soul, not to get too deep too fast, but I think it is that snap of energy that happens between someone who's sharing and someone who is being shared with, I guess. And I think of that as storytelling between friends. I think of it as storytelling to a large group. Anything that is momentary, spontaneous, and energetic. So that's where I'll start.
That's really good. I want to say what she said. No, can't do that. What is theater? Theater, I mean, to make it very personal, theater is home. Theater is that place that, I think a lot of theater artists and artists in general, but theater artists feel like, we all belong on the island of misfit toys. And then when you find that you're a misfit toy and you find that there is an island for you, that is, it's such a relief. And so I absolutely felt like it comes from a very personal place. The way I want to tell stories with other people, for other people, is because stories were told to me. And I sort of went, oh, I can find myself here. And all of the business, yes, like theater, storytelling, myth making, all of those words do resonate with me. And I also want to like roll my eyes at them because they feel like cheesy because they are so big and they go so deep, but they really are real. But fundamentally, it just feels like whether I'm on the stage looking into the dark or whether I'm sitting in the dark looking into the stage or I'm outside, like that space, which is not even a space, feels like home. I love it.
That's great. Carrie.
Gosh, I want to take all these answers too. I think for me, when I talk, I also sometimes teach classes in reviewing. I've taught at Columbia, DePaul, and when I try to talk to my students about what it's like to try to write about theater, I describe it as lightning in a bottle, because you're writing about something that is happening in that moment, right in front of you that night. Even if the show has a longer run, we all know it's never the same exact show from night to night. There's always these gradations in energy, and the thing that Ashley talked about, the giving and the receiving, that can be a little different every night. So I think it's trying to give something that will last in a form that is not inherently meant to last. And that's the great paradox of it. And it can be quite frustrating as a writer to try to, enshrine, and this is the definitive word, and realizing that no, there is no definitive word on it. It's just something that ebbs and flows, and yet hopefully just keeps going. What that means in the digital age, I don't know. I'm really interested to hear what a lot of practitioners have to say about that.
All right, thank you. And Jim.
What's left? I think when I talk to my students, I talk about theater as something that I think is in our DNA as humans, that I think it's not only something that we partake of, but that is essential in terms of our desire to be in community. And that what makes theater special is that it's that magical thing that happens in that space, shared by live people on stage, sharing the experience with a live audience. So the whole idea of digital theater is complex.
Yeah, I agree. That idea that and before we went live, we were talking a little bit about teaching online. Ashley, to think about what you said about someone sharing and being shared with, that is such an interesting point. And I wonder, I know I have difficulties as a teacher doing that online, right? So what sort of online theater experiences in the room have we had that we like feel like, oh man, I was really being shared with, or I felt this sense? Has anybody, like, I know we're not doing that as much anymore these days, it feels like, but I'd love to hear what positive examples of that you've had.
There was a show that is at court, and I cannot remember the name now, but it was we were sort of in a waiting room, and then we in many cases it was happening live over Zoom, where it was one-on-one. I think Cindy Charles was a part of that. I apologize that I cannot remember the name. Time is a flat tire, and my memory is not great since the pandemic, I think. But that to me felt like the closest thing to that sort of, I don't want to say confessional, because that implies, a certain kind of, personal autobiographical, and I don't think that was the intent with the piece, but where it really felt that they were making that connection between a very specific member of the audience and a very specific performer in that moment, and it was unfolding live. So that's one example that comes to mind. I would say in general, I think the ones that have participated in liveness have felt a little closer to me to the experience of actually being in the theater than something that was recorded, no matter how beautifully, and then archived. Although I certainly understand why those shows were important, and I'm very happy when they're there, because as I've said, it's a disappearing art form, and you can't always, as much as I try, I can't see every show. So sometimes it's nice to know that there's some repository out there that I can go to.
Yeah. I think just listening to all of your answers and then thinking of this, and I don't want to say in comparison to, but in concert with the idea of digital theater, I think that one thing that we all kind of talked around a little bit is the idea that theater is both small and huge, right? It is intimate, it is focused, it is live right now, and yet it is also this like legacy that we're a part of, and this, like you said, the community that we're a part of. And I think the thing with digital is that trying to find in a digital world, interestingly enough, I feel like we have found the closeness. And now I'm interested to see how we find the greatness and the vastness of the digital theater world, right? Because, I mean, for goodness sakes, every single person in the world understands what Zoom is and how it works right now. So then how do we figure out how to share that on a different scale? But I personally am, I don't know, I'm so old school. It's real bad. I'm teaching this class online right now, and it's just I think that my mindset is really kind of my block right now to figuring out how to do it really successfully. And I'm trying, but there's it's an interesting digital, like I'm fighting the digital world in a way that I think is not very helpful for where we're all going. So I don't know. I mean, how, like, James, you said that you teach improv. How in the world would you do something like that
We had to figure it out. and we did it, and so it was like, okay, now I'm sending you the energy, and then you send it to someone else, and we managed, but a lot of what I talk about, particularly in improvisation classes, is about sharing the space and making eye contact and making connection. Right. And so who are we kidding? I wanted to go back to what Carrie mentioned. I've seen, as I'm sure you all have, the National Theater Live broadcasts, and those have been great, right? Because we've had a chance to see some things that we wouldn't normally get a chance to see. And even going to see them with an audience has been nice. So when the shutdown happened, I don't know if this is I was like desperate for something theatrical, and saw everything from, just people doing readings, to people trying to do things with cameras. But one excellent experience that I did have was from the Wilma Theater, when they were first doing James Iam's Pulitzer Prize winning play, Fat Ham. But they took it out of the theater, and the play takes place during the course of a family barbecue. So they went to somebody's backyard and they just did the play. So again, it was great because we got an opportunity to get a sense of what it was like to see this great play, but it's just not the same, so I'm just so happy to be back, back in the classroom and back in the theater.
That's really fascinating.
We know we can do it now, and I think streaming is probably with us forever now. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, because if it does give theaters opportunities to get to audiences that they normally wouldn't, great, of course, right? But I can't think of the exact analogy. I don't know. It's just not the same.
It's true, but it's one of the things I think that many of us have noticed over the last, I say this with playwrights in the room, but the last 20 years, is that the scripts themselves have become a little bit more cinematic in how they're constructed and what the expectations are. And with a situation like the one you described with the barbecue, that's such a fascinating combination of like using film, but also using the liveness of theater, right? So to me, that's a really interesting experiment in like crossing over in a more authentic way. I don't know, like that sounds really interesting to me. So
I'm thinking about another show I saw that I really liked, Interrobang, which unfortunately just shut down. But they did a show called The Spin, and it was literally a Zoom play. Everything was happening over Zoom, and it was a political scandal that was unfolding in real time. So you have the chat between the political consultants trying to keep the media message going while the candidate is being interviewed. So you have all these multiple layers all unfolding on the screen, and it was, I believe, it was done live as well. So it just, that added a certain kind of adrenaline. Now that's the sort of play that maybe it wouldn't work as well. If I saw it in the theater and these screens were just popping up, I might feel that the digital component was getting in the way of the three-dimensionality of the performances. But I thought it was just really a smart kind of way to lean into the fact that, okay, if we're doing everything over Zoom right now during this pandemic, let's really make this a story about how Zoom controls narratives in a world where the stakes are a little bit higher, So that was, maybe a little bit higher than, our usual check-in meetings or whatever we have. Although I don't know what your meetings are like, so.
Well, okay, let me ask it this way. Jim, based on what you're saying that it's just not the same, right? I agree with you. My question is, does it have to be the same? And follow-up question that I'll ask in advance for all of you, is it still theater if it's not the same?
Well, what is theater?
Oh, man. Well, hold on, let me rewind and go find out. Well, theater is sharing, and it's immediate and spontaneous, and it's home, and it's all of those things. So can you have home in the digital world? And is it home for the audience or home for the collaborators making it?
I think it can be both. I don't know how. I mean, I shouldn't speak. I'm sorry, because I don't create theater in that sense. But I know I've talked to, well, particularly like with children's theater. I know I've done a few interviews with Chicago Children's Theater, and they've talked about some of the programming that they've done and the classes and the collaborative work they've done. And it's not just about breaking down geographic distances, but there are some kids who are just, maybe they're, neuroatypical, or they just have other reasons why being in a room creating is not necessarily as comfortable for them, but maybe in their world, interacting with, the screen world maybe is a little bit easier. So I think that's something else to think about, is if we're thinking about who our audiences are, maybe not working on the assumption that the liveness is always, always, always the thing that's going to make the difference for them. And there might be ways that, now, this is a specific example related to specific types of audiences. I would just, Melanie, did you do digital work during the shutdown? And I'd just kind of love to hear from your perspective as a performer what that felt like, if that's okay.
I did. And there was one Zoom play that I remembered. It wasn't, I don't remember what platform we were using, and it was relatively early, but somehow, and I was sort of hesitating to share this because it feels like really ego-centered, but I'm an actor, so somehow I was able to see like how many live viewers there were while we were doing the play. And so even though I couldn't see them, I had a counter that told me they were out there. And just knowing that there were souls, even it was my mother and she had walked out of the room and was like in the other room making a sandwich, like that gave me like a level of engagement that I felt like, okay, I'm here. I'm much more engaged because I'm trying to like beam it through the computer, whatever it is I'm trying to do here. So that gave me a different kind of like, engagement. It was sort of a facsimile of what you feel in the dark space, where you also can't, when you're on the stage and you're looking in the void, you don't know if they're looking at you, if they've fallen asleep, but you trust that they're there. And so just that, knowing that there were humans out there felt different. Because it was live, and I could still really mess it up live in real time. So I liked that experience as a performer, and I knew that there were a couple of times that as an audience member I was watching things that were live, and not recorded. And also sometimes there were opportunities in various platforms to sort of do shout outs in the chat and have, as you were talking about, Kara, that like real-time live chat, which is sort of two modalities at once and feels, in some ways it might feel disrespectful, like I wouldn't normally be talking during a performance, but if this is how I can engage with a performance, then it activates me as an audience member. And knowing that somebody's like, hi from Sydney, Australia, like that, that's cool. And it does change accessibility.
Yeah. I sat in, actually, you're talking about improv. I did a piece on improv online early on, because I mean, everything we were writing about in my section in the reader was like, how are they doing this online? How are they doing circus online? How are they doing improv online? Yeah. And I sat in on one of the drop-in classes that Second City Training Center had early on. And I was just fly on the wall. So I really wasn't, participating in that sense. But exactly what you said, Melanie, they had people across time zones, and a lot of them were people who'd, never really done anything like this, or they hadn't done it in a really long time. And it was just, I'm cooped up in my house on a Thursday night and I need something to do. And this is just a fun way to meet people. And I thought it worked better than I would have imagined, under the circumstances. And maybe it worked better because these were people who were not already deeply rooted in improv and the expectations of how that was supposed to go. I don't want to presume, but I mean, the sense I got was that a lot of the people there had not, they certainly weren't people who'd spent years, studying the art form. They just were interested in trying something new. And so that kind of freshness I found really refreshing, I guess.
So maybe, go ahead, James. You're the one he asked a question of, and so I
You should have had time to put together an answer, but no.
You go ahead.
Well, I grabbed my phone to look it up because I also had another memory of something that I saw during the shutdown. There was a series of plays by a player named Richard Nelson, who wrote family plays for Zoom. So the play he wrote was for us to watch, and it was a family gathering during the shutdown that was getting together on Zoom. And it was brilliant. And he had Marianne Plunkett and J.L. Sanders on it. And so that was really interesting, And I worked recently with a director who just said he's giving up working in the theater. He thinks the future is VR. And so all he wants to do is get the big thing on his head. And he's now going to create things for virtual reality. So is that theater, Hank? I don't know. I suppose we can certainly call it theater, under the grand umbrella of performance and spectator. The thing I'm going to miss is the community, and it's just going to, and again, it's because I'm an old-fashioned guy.
Well, I think that instead of redefining the word theater, maybe what we're redefining is the word live. Because I would make the argument that we have a community right here and we are live, and in more ways than one. But like, and I can tell you that right now, if I weren't doing this, I'd probably be scrolling through Instagram or reading a book by myself. And, and so there's a community that I'm gaining here that I would not have had alternatively. So I guess that, when I look at this space, or when I think about this space, it serves similar, not the same, but very similar desires, I think. I mean, how many of us had cocktail hours with our buddies during Zoom, or figured out what was the Netflix watch parties where you could watch movies with people? And so, I think that they're really exploring what the idea of live means. It's kind of an interesting thing.
Well, I think too, or maybe, I think back to one of the things that I loved was there were so many radio plays, like not the visual, but live radio plays that I got to hear. And I thought, well, this has been a tradition for a long time, particularly, in the UK and Ireland. A lot of playwrights do radio plays in addition to the other work they do. And I would love to have that as maybe podcasts are what we have for that now. I don't know. But I just found that to be really refreshing. Sometimes if I was zoomed out for a day, to just be able to turn out the lights and just turn on some, and just hear it. And some of those were done live and some were pre-recorded, but it just gave me a chance to sort of settle into a different, modality, as you put it,
Yeah.
Melanie. And I found that really interesting. And I don't think any of us would ever say that radio plays are not actually plays. They're just a different medium of delivery, right? So
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if a radio play is a radio play
is the
theater.
play? Is it? I don't know.
I mean, it's clearly it's dramatic writing,
Right.
right? From that point of view. I guess I would argue that like maybe if it's done in like a closed studio, like the mystery, like whatever, or
Yeah.
X minus 0 or whatever, right? That's one thing. But then like a Burns and Allen or a comedy that's in front of an audience, then I think you're definitely theatrical. Oh, wait, Melanie. There we go.
See?
I knew I'd say something that get
See?
people going. Awesome.
I'm like, is he just being a contrarian over here? No, because I mean, do we need? Whoa, Melanie. Do we
Open the box.
audience?
Open the
Because
box.
for me as a performer, one of the hardest, like leaving the rehearsal room is sometimes that's a very sad day. Like I'm excited, yes, to share it with the audience, but it feels so precious and intimate for we, the performers and the stage management and the designers and like just the people who have made this thing, this ephemeral thing. And so I'm thinking about like a radio play where it's the performers and the sound engineers and like, that's theater. Come on, man. It's theater.
Are we going to vote on that or no? No. Sure. Yes. Okay.
I mean, I agree. I think that's because you have someone who is generating an idea, you have an idea that is being generated, and you have someone who is receiving it on some level. It may not be what we traditionally call an audience, but you do have someone who is there and who is, in some ways, the other actors on stage are an audience. The other performers are the audience. So
it's like if a tree falls in the forest. If we put on a play and there's no audience, is it a play?
I keep quoting that wonderful line from Lily Tomlin's Search for Signs of Intelligent Life in the Universe. If any of you have seen it, at the very end, her character, Trudy the bag lady, has taken her alien friends to the theater. And earlier she's tried to explain to them the difference between an Andy Warhol painting of a can of soup and a can of soup. So it's like soup, art. And at the end of the show, she realizes the aliens have not been watching what's on the stage. They've been watching the audience and taking in their reactions to the story. And then she said, well, they told her the show was soup, the audience was art. And I found myself thinking about that an awful lot since we've come back from shutdown, because, it just felt so good to be in that live presence. But then again, yes, there were chances to have conversations with people 2 time zones away about something that we had just seen. There were a few magic shows. I thought, magic? How do you do magic on the internet? Well, let me tell you, I saw a couple that blew my mind. And it was, again, audiences from the UK and Ireland and Hawaii. And I mean, why is somebody, some of these people had to be up in the middle of the night to do this. So that was commitment. And it did feel, rather unified. And maybe that's the nature of magic as a performance, as a performance art, that it does ask us to lean into the impossible and the improbable. But I don't think it was just that. I really do think it was this idea that we could be agreeing to the story and be agreeing to be in that world. And I think we do that with suspension of disbelief in all kinds of different stories in the theater. So I think that's maybe part of what builds it up. Not that we don't do that with film, but it just feels like the stakes are different. And I'm not exactly sure I can quantify that or explain it well, but it just is the sort of gut dividing line that I have between whether something is feeling like theatrical or something else. So
there's just something about being in a space with another human. And I mean, I would make the argument that we're in the same space with another human, if not physically, emotionally, mentally, intellectually. And I think when I'm in the movie theater, I'm well, I like to go see movies at like 9 a.m. on a Saturday. So I'm the only one in the theater. I do that on purpose. But like, I recognize the fact that I'm not in the room with another human, right? Like I'm watching a movie by myself at home, or I'm in the, and I think that, see, now this is going to take me to my next question, which someone has already asked, James. Like, what is the audience? Like, how do we define audience now? Right? Is the audience there when you performed it the first time, or when it was recorded, or is it every single time it's been played since then?
Yeah, interesting. Well, let me just add one thing to what you were just saying, because I talk to my students about what's special about the theater and compare it to the experience of going to a movie. Because when I go to a movie, I know I'm just going to sit there and eat my popcorn and have my Junior Mints, and I can relax and watch the movie, because I'm not a participant in the event. The movie doesn't care whether or not I'm there, right?
Right.
In the theater, of course, you're a participant in the event. You're part of everything that's going on. So now this conversation is really kind of expanding my consciousness. So even if we are doing something technological and we're not all exactly in the same room, if just like this, we're alive and live human beings are performing for other live human beings, and it's not recorded, then I think I'm there. And then, okay, Hank, it is theater. Once it's recorded, then I'm watching a movie. Is my current thinking on that.
Right.
So we're the spectators for this event.
Hopefully they're live. Do you have a counter?
Well,
Melanie, do you have a counter? Do you know how many?
I sure don't.
we don't share the counter. We don't want anybody getting nervous. Well, we'll see if your students logged in, Ashley. But beyond that, I don't know. Jim, I totally agree with you. Like when I go to see a movie, I know that it doesn't matter to the screen that I'm there, but does it matter to you? Do you also, Jim, go to the movies at 9 a.m. on a Saturday?
Oh, sure.
Right? Like that matters to me,
Listen,
right? Like
anytime you go to the movies these days, you're going to have plenty of space to yourself.
That's fair.
Yeah, yes and no, right? Like I came up through film before I even dealt with theater, and like just this last year here in Chicago, went to the Music Box, right, for Sing Along Sound of Music. That was definitely theatrical, right? And the double
among
feature,
many other things, I'm sure.
yeah, and the double feature of It's a Wonderful Life and White Christmas, right? And you're in a room with 400, 500 people to see a 60-year-old film. But that matters to me because I want to be in that room with those people.
Right.
Right. So I know none of the people in White Christmas care if I was there. But I don't know, right? Like I think that even with film, depending on, you're making a conscious choice about what sort of audience you want to be in.
Rocky Horror.
So I don't know. Like I always much rather see a comedy with a bunch of people. Those other people's laughter, right? So yeah, but also I'm thinking about the VR thing you were talking about, and all I could think of was the application to your play Chagall. And like, wow, what if suddenly I was walking through like the stained glass overwhelming thing, or that I was in the middle of one of the paintings in what would normally be a scene change, or a lights out, lights up, lights down.
Well,
yeah, I don't know.
If that was a possibility, though, then I would have
hear anybody. Did I lose my hearing?
What?
Okay, that must just be me. Damn. Jim, keep going. I'm going to figure out my technical problem.
All right. I was just going to say, so I wrote a play about Marc Chagall, and part of the intent was to have projections, of course, of some of the artwork. If it became something that could be done in VR, then I would have written it that way. You know, and I think that's the other thing is playwrights are already creating things. I mean, yes, we could always write radio plays, even if we didn't think we were going to make any money at it. We never think we're going to make any money at it. But I think now there are opportunities. You know, there was a time when we didn't teach on-camera classes for young actors, and now, of course, we do, because you know that's a thing. So I'm sure you know this technology isn't going to go away. So it's going to create new opportunities for everybody. So whether or not we call it the thing that we've always called it, or we're going to come up with new terms, I think remains to be seen.
I'm also thinking about the, like, I have a friend who hates the term immersive theater because she's like, it's all immersive. It's a silly term. But I think if you look at, well, I mean, obviously, I feel like I'm giving a litany of companies that have had hard times too, which is maybe a topic for another show. But Windy City Playhouse, when they did Southern Gothic, I don't think that play on a straight proscenium stage, it's pretty soapy. I mean, I think it would have just been like, yeah, that's okay. But putting us in that house and having us go around and be a part of this 1960s Southern, you know, very boozy birthday party where secrets are revealed and you're not sure who to follow or what you're going to hear at what point in time. Those shows seem to do really well. People seem to have a hunger for that, because even if they're not interactive, you know, you're still kind of fly on the wall. You're not being brought into the scenes. There's a sense that they feel like they're being brought in a way that maybe they wouldn't if they were just sitting with a bunch of other people. Like they have the agency to take that on. And to me, that feels like even if you're not using virtual reality mechanics, there's still that choose your own adventure quality. There's still that idea that you are making the story for yourself in some way, or at least choosing things that will add up to the story in a different way than it might if you were all just sitting there watching the same story at the same time unfold in front of you. So I don't know where that fits in with it, but it's something I've been thinking about, because it does seem like these are shows that when I talk to people who don't go to a lot of theater, a lot of them did go to see that Windy City Playhouse show, or they've seen other similar things, or they saw, whatever there's been so many in New York now, but Then She Fell, which I know Third Rail has worked with the Albany Park Theater Project here in Chicago. They have another show opening this month. What's the big one with am I allowed to say Scottish play? Yes, that's it.
No
yes,
more.
thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Sleep No More. I wasn't sure if I could say the Scottish play. Like, is this actually a theater? And would that be bad?
Well.
I don't know.
I have a son who's an actor in Philadelphia, and he told me he just got cast in immersive Titus Andronicus.
What?
Yeah, so we have that to look forward to.
Wow.
Are we going to look forward to that? That's
Well,
What are the concessions
some
going to be
pie?
like?
yeah, I know. I don't know if there's Yeah, I'll get back to you on that.
So this is really interesting to me, because especially as we start to kind of talk about sorry, my brain is just like moving here with immersive theater or VR, and then kind of contrasting this to what James, you were saying about being a playwright and writing for specific things, right? I'm gonna poke a little bit and make the argument that playwrights don't know what tools are out there. They know some of them, right? Like, for example, as a costume designer, I don't know every tool a costume shop has, right? I can come up with an idea and then someone else can come to me and say, what if we did it this way? And my mind can be like, yes, right? And I think that the same thing can happen with playwrights and with new ways of telling stories. Because I notice when you talk about like writing a play that has VR or doesn't, but as we move forward, you know, we're going to be taking all of these old scripts and scripts that are current right now, but will be old in 20 years, you know, and changing them. And what kind of tools are we going to have for that? So I think it, you know, this idea of knowing all of the possible ways of telling a story. I don't know. I have no idea. I'm going to make the argument that we have no idea. So, I don't know.
Melanie, you got.
I don't feel poked by that, Ashley. No, I agree.
Okay.
You know, no, listen, I've had wonderful experiences where, I mean, this is what I love about the collaboration. You know, getting into the room and a director or a designer or an actor will come up with something about my play that I had no inkling of. You know,
Yeah.
So I love that. You know, and I think that's just going to continue as we add these different technological possibilities.
It's true. I hope Titus Andronicus is opening in October. That's all I can.
Melanie, it looked like you had something to jump in on.
I'm like Ashley, where my brain is like pinging all over the place, but thinking about the use of projections in plays and how, you know, there are so many plays that were never written with projections in mind. And then somebody comes along and says, oh, sorry, I've got a cat doing things. Of course, cat wants to be a part of the show. You know, we're adding projections, and do they enhance, do they limit? Do, you know, if we're giving you the images, is that, if we give the audiences the images, does that detract from what their imaginations can do? And then I bounce over to like the immersive Van Gogh, the immersive, you know, pick a artist, and like, what is that neither fish nor fowl kind of a thing, where like, this is a painting that I am used to be, I would stand in front of it and look at it, and now it's all around me. Is that theater? I mean, that kind of breaks my brain. Like, what a cool, trippy thing that exists now, not accessible because it's too expensive at the moment, in my opinion. But like, but what an interesting merging of different, you know, like we've got something very analog and we make it super digital, and then it becomes something altogether different. I have no question with that, but I just think that it's like a really interesting mashup.
Well, because I saw the immersive Van Gogh and the immersive Mozart, and I would draw the line there, Melanie, because I think, I mean, Carrie, just like you said, the immersive thing, what was something, whatever the thing at Windy City Playhouse.
Well, Southern
You know,
Gothic, yeah.
there are things like that, and I don't know. There are some shows that are like theater for people that don't usually go to the theater, and that's great. You know, I think the immersive Van Gogh is like art for people who don't usually go to museums. You know, and again, that's great because then we're getting people that wouldn't normally see that kind of thing to see that kind of thing. Now, if you had some people playing Van Gogh or Mozart, I don't know.
Could we have like a haunted house immersive art, like that kind of, you know, maybe for Halloween we have Van Gogh with his ear, anyway, or maybe that would work. Maybe for the Titus Andronicus, if you immersive, but a haunted house, you know, with strobes and the whole thing. I mean, you know, and then if you're there in October, Ashley, you will have quite a show to look forward to.
Yep.
I like it.
I have a question, and I don't know if it's inappropriate to bring this up, but I'm wondering for the maybe more for you, Jim, as a writer, but just in general, do you who are creators in the field feel since the pandemic there is pressure on you to do shows that speak to the moment? Because I think that I was in New York right after September 11th at a conference at Columbia University, and there was this panel of playwrights, and there was somebody who was like, we need you to write the plays. We need you to tell us what, you know, like make this explain this to us, help us understand it. And they're like, wait, we all just went through the same things you all did. We are as scared and confused and at sea. And I'm wondering if some of the same thing is happening now with the idea that we put so much heft on theater. And, you know, Melanie, you talked about people telling stories, and that's one way of making sense of the world. I think you said that, or I may be paraphrasing you. But are you feeling that pressure? Do you feel, are people asking you, can you write something that somehow reflects on this? Or does that feel like it's still too on the nose right now? Because I've had people ask me, are you seeing a lot of plays about the pandemic? I'm like, nothing real specific, but I mean, it's really hard to not make the connection sometimes for some of these shows that, this feels like, and maybe it wasn't even intended, but we've all been living this for the last, we did, for definitely hardcore for 2 years. For a lot of us, it's still part of our lives. So I'm just curious about that. Or if not,
I think he's thinking. No. He's thinking.
Because for the record, I'm also on the Jeff committee, so I see a lot of what's going on. So this is maybe my personal bias, and I think I would want to be off the record with you to cite specific examples, but occasionally I will see plays that are written to make a point. And again, not that I don't think you can do agitprop. It's just not my cup of tea, and I still think we're going to see there's going to be new forms, certainly, as we've been discussing. But I still get excited when I go to a new play and I don't know what, it's probably something new and I have no idea what it's going to be. And there's good acting and directing and I have a wonderful time, and I don't think we'll ever lose that. I think that goes back to the first thing I said, that I think that's still just part of our genetic makeup. We still want to do that.
I am not a playwright, but I have been wondering if we will see those pandemic specific plays 5 to 10 years down the road, the way there were this is my experience that in the 80s, there were lots of plays about Vietnam, right? So Tracers and what was it? Darkness and those other things. So are we going to get a little distance from it where we're not fatigued by it, but then we're going to go, okay, now we've got some perspective and let's see it from, a different lens. I don't know. I've just been wondering, is that something we're going to see down the road when we're ready for it? Because I'm not ready.
Yeah, I mean, the only one that I can remember seeing that was sort of speaking immediately to it was a play called The Line that the Public Theater did. I don't know if anybody else saw it, and it was just monologues. It was the same team that had done The Exonerated, and they had, it was Allison Pill and other wonderful people whose names again out of my head, but John Ortiz I think was in it, and these were just docudrama. These were actual monologues from people who were on the front line. It was the EMTs, the nursing home workers, and it had a very raw, first draft of history feeling to it. But I was really happy that I got to see it because I thought, these are the voices I want to hear right now, and I don't need it put into some kind of overarching beautiful metaphor. I just need to bear witness, and this is a way to do that. I think that was part of it. The pandemic was, we were also isolated. There's a whole idea of you can come together. And I think when the Black Lives Matter protests around the George Floyd murders and Breonna Taylor murders happened in that summer, I think I have to think part of it was not just the cry for justice, but it was also, this gives me a way to get out and be with people again. This gets me out of my house. And I think that felt really important because it had been so hard to be reading about what was happening, but know that you were watching it again from the distance, from the screen, hearing it on your news, or watching, the numbers creep up every time you turned on, the Google app and your, the Google News feed in your phone. I'm just curious because I feel like there is, I always find it kind of frustrating and sadly amusing that we don't really seem to trust artists in our society very much, but we sure as heck want them to explain the world to us and make us feel better about things and take care of that social problem, right? We won't give them enough funding, but we definitely think they're the ones who can do this, if they just really try.
Carrie, do you think this is a fair observation? I would say that COVID hasn't influenced the plays we're seeing now so much as Black Lives Matter.
I think that is fair. Yeah. And I think because
that's definitely,
that had been building before. I think even in fact, I think I was going to write about this, and then the shutdown happened. I think there were about 3 plays all on Chicago stages in winter of 2020 before the shutdown that in some way spoke to police violence. And so that was already in the works. And then I think it just got heightened. So whereas I think the experience of a pandemic is not something most of us had lived through. I don't think any of us were alive in 1918. But there might be Time Lords here. I don't want to assume. So I think maybe that's one reason it seems like it maybe is taking a little longer too, because it is so unprecedented in most of our personal experiences. So
one thing I will say is I am also not a playwright, but as someone who's been in conversations about, in this very modernist theater point of view of like, what is the concept, right? But in finding meaning in scripts, there is a heightened sense of media, period, and our reliance on it, and our audience's reliance on it. And when we talk about, like in the meetings that I've been in and the shows that I've worked on, there's an interest in a little bit more either flash and dazzle or more media on stage. I actually just got back from the Prague Quadrennial that happens every 4 years, and there was just so much media. There was so much visual stuff, like film, video, things, and layered with so many other different events that were happening. And I think that it really kind of our sensibility of how media has been integrated with everything else has changed. And so even though I wouldn't say that, like, well, I mean, COVID has absolutely affected costumes in many stretch spandex kind of ways. Just as far as sitting in those meetings, how we tell stories on stage has changed.
I wonder, Carrie, something you said about hey, artists, do this. Tell us what to think.
I'm not telling them that, but I feel like that is what, there is that expectation.
That was fabulous. Nailed it, by the way.
Yeah. Like, we're not going to give you money, but
yeah. But just tell us what everything means.
Right.
Yeah. But I'm curious if there's like a hierarchy there. Like I agree with you. Like the social justice and those things, that storyline was already starting to happen.
Yeah.
Pre-pandemic. And I'm curious if in response to the pandemic itself, if it's like, just make us feel good.
Yeah.
Right. If that's, and then in 5 years, tell us what happened.
I think as you're speaking, I'm thinking about that great scene in Sullivan's Travels where he's going out, he wants to make the, "Oh, brother, where art thou?" the common man. And then he sees the cartoons with the other, guys on the chain gang who are just watching the movie in the church. And he realizes, oh, just being able to take people out of themselves for a little bit and laugh is also a social good. I don't think people always need to be reminded of the fact that things are can be pretty grim. And I think there can be a self-congratulatory, look at us, we're so brave telling you this sort of thing to it sometimes too. But yeah, and I guess maybe that's where the idea of community, and wherever you may find it, whether it is, actually live in the space, or whether it's, you were talking about reactions from audiences. One of my favorite moments that's happened since I started going back to shows, I went to see the touring production of Frozen in Broadway in Chicago. Now, I don't have kids. So I'm not even all that. I knew what Frozen was. I knew the story a little bit, but there was this little kid behind me who just absolutely lost their mind every time Olaf came on stage. It was just like, and I was like, that is absolutely the right reaction.
Yep.
And that is why this play is so, this show right now is so important. And I started thinking about this kid, how much has this kid been able to get out and see things, Sorry, we had a cat situation going on.
I'm curious. Is
Speaking
it
of
the same
livestock.
cat in each of
No,
your
I've seen
our
Stan in 3
houses.
different
Yeah.
boxes.
Yeah.
No, they know when we're on camera, so
Yeah.
they start fighting with each other. But yeah, I mean, just that. I just loved that honest reaction and just that excitement of like I am in the, and it's just nice to think that people can get that. And I think sometimes it comes from the more political stuff or just feeling like, okay, I'm being seen. And yeah, maybe it's preaching to the choir, but sometimes the choir needs to hear, some reinforcement and reification too. So
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a quick other question about this, and it goes back to Carrie, you had said like when you were talking about like radio theater, like some
Mhm.
days you were just zoomed out,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And I felt that, right? Like I was like, people are like, oh, have you streamed this show? And I'm like, God, no, I've been on a computer all day. I don't
Right.
want to relax on a computer. And for that reason, I sort of abstained from seeing like theater online in the beginning of the pandemic
Mhm.
because that was my whole world. I'm wondering if Zoom itself, hello Zoom overlords, if Zoom itself as a delivery device is an obstacle to people enjoying what they're seeing in online theater, because I come here to teach, I come here to have meetings with
Mhm.
my theater company, to see friends, to have cocktail hours. Is this platform itself its own obstacle? Not the internet, not digital. I'm just curious.
As a non-TikTok practitioner, I feel like that's kind of what TikTok is. And then TikTok, you can react to somebody else within TikTok and you can make a new thing on it. So I think you're right that this platform feels a little, dusty and not as dynamic as what the kids are. I mean, listen, I know, but I think you may be exactly right, and that's why it's not the preferred delivery system for the cool youth. I think you're probably exactly right.
Yeah, I don't know, right? Like it's like when I think about this earlier definition of yours of like it's a home, right? Like, no, this has been a workspace for me.
Yeah.
And so is it, I'm just wondering if there are maybe if it's got its own barriers to some of that stuff. I don't know. I'll just add I recently saw a show with my daughter, and it was called somebody bought us tickets, right? It was called The Invisible Man, and I was like, oh, like is it H.G. Wells? Is it what, Ralph Ellison? I go, who knows, right? Like tell me about this. And it's not. It was none of that. This was in London. It was a theater company from Denmark. And the whole bit was it was just sort of stage magic. One character was invisible. And so the piano played and all of this stuff moved and he sat down to play and the cushion went down. It was brilliant and beautiful, right? And the children loved it, and you could hear him speak, and the whole premise was it was amazing, right? Then they kept upping the stakes with the practical stage magic, and they went to a digital thing where eventually like the hook was they had a live camera, and now we're watching something on a monitor, and clearly somebody was in a booth switching between live and tape, but it pulled that whole media thing in such a lovely way, in such a charming way that kept promoting that. And it really was great. But to Carrie's point, going and seeing a show that is like meant for people 6 to 10 can be such a joy. You can sometimes forget that energy of like, oh, it's Olaf again. Yeah. All right. I feel like I'm looking at the clock. Kyle, do I need to do a little wrap up here, or what's going on? Okay. We're getting an I don't know. I guess I'll throw this out then. Like, is there a final? Anybody got a final thought on this? Where everybody hit your button for the last time? What do you got?
Go see children's theater. Rediscover that.
Yeah. Or try to see something you haven't seen before. I mean, I think that's one of the great things about being a critic is that, I mean, I do get to assign myself more a little bit now that I am the, but there is that sense of like, I go to things that maybe just by myself, I would not necessarily be that drawn to see. And I try to keep an open mind, obviously. And that can be such a great, just to take that chance. And I think we have well, I don't know. We'll see how the streaming services continue to do this. They're going to do what they've been doing to TCM. But I was going to say, we'll have every conceivable movie or television show at our fingertips. It takes more of an effort to go out and see some kind of theater that you haven't encountered before. So I think that's part of, try to be a little adventurous with it if we can. I'm probably, again, preaching to the choir here, but, comfort is good, but then so is the unknown sometimes.
I think the takeaway for me is just go see live theater, full stop. I used to be like a frequent goer to the theater, and I haven't been as much myself. And, just this conversation is reminding me how much I love it. And I'm gotta get back out there.
Yes, lucky us, we're in Chicago.
Yeah.
And I've seen amazing theater in rooms, that seat 20, 30 people, besides the big houses. So there's still, while we all, Carrie, you've written some of the articles that we've all read about the troubling times and companies that aren't in existence anymore. But I also believe, again, back when I was talking about how it's amazing to me that there are still young people who want to major in theater, and also every year there's some group of students from some graduating class that have graduated and they're going to start a company and they're going to be the next Steppenwolf. And I've seen some of their shows and good for them, so people have been talking about theaters dying for hundreds of years. I'm delighted to be a part of this conversation because I really don't believe that, but I think this really affirms that for us, and I hope for whoever is watching.
That's awesome. I sort of think to congeal all of this, I just want to say, like, Ashley, that idea of like sharing and being shared with, and Melanie saying like, people told me stories, I want to tell stories, right? And I think that ties into this, Jim. I think like all of us are pretty much somewhere in the middle of having been told stories and wanting to tell stories, right? And it is an affirmation to see people filling up these programs and wanting to, and taking intro to theater online over the summer, right? Hey, right? Like that's gotta be like, man, that's awesome. But yeah, I don't know, right? Like maybe the immersive Van Gogh gets somebody to go see the immersive Titus Andronicus, and that gets them to go see a non-immersive something, right? As we continually talk about theater dying, I think looking at those things and trying to figure out like where are the new on-ramps, right? Like where, like, man, my 8-year-old loved seeing Olaf. What do I give them next? Right? Like what's the next thing? So who knows, right? All right. I think now I'm gonna wrap this up with some thank yous and some final statements real quick, if you don't mind. Hold on, I got to do a little paperwork here. So I want to thank Kyle Hammond for creating and producing the show and being our engineer. Thank you to officehours.global and Edwin Ruiz and Mondo Machine. Thank You 5 is made possible by Strawdog Theater Company ensemble members. Strawdog Theater Company is now run on a free theater model. So where our productions are available to anyone and everyone. So we can only do this with generous donations from our community. You can find more information about donating or becoming a Strawdog member and helping to continually support our work at our website, strawdog.org. And we do this every week. And it's usually a completely new mix of people. Ashley, you are welcome back. You're a two-timer club now, I believe. So we'll see if we get you a jacket at 5.
Get a pin maybe at 20.
Right. I love it. Let's figure that out. We can figure that out after we wrap this up. Like, what are the hallmarks and milestones? If you want to be on and come talk to us, if you have a friend who you want to put on the hot seat and have them come talk to us, suggest us. I'll tell you, like, we're always looking out and reaching out for other people to be here and in the mix. Right. And so, like, clearly this is a good conversation with good people who are passionate about this topic. So come and join us, get in the mix. I just thank you all again, panelists, for being here and being part of this and sharing your thoughts. And, you know, I'm gonna point to Ashley again. I'm gonna point this way because she's here in my Brady Bunch scheme. Like, thanks for going straight to bearing the soul right out of the gate, right? Like, these are the things we want, right? Like, no light hand work. Like, just let's get dirty. All right. Hey, each and every one of you, thank you so much. I am thrilled to be in this room with you, and I hope to be in a physical room with you sometime soon, all of you. Everyone, have a lovely night. Thank you for your time. I think we can wrap this up if we want to say goodbye in person after the shows. I don't know. Kyle, how does this, do we just wrap or sayonara, adieu, auf Wiedersehen, and done?